Research Roundtable, discussions with new researchers. Research Roundtable is a segmented overview of issues faced by new researchers from their own perspective.
Hello everyone, this is Rob Rennick, and for my vlog entry, I thought I'd share with you a little bit about my thought process and my actual process for developing my literature review for my dissertation. I want to start out by talking about what is my research question. Right now, it's definitely in rough draft form, and I think it will probably be refined, but this is what it looks like. Is the academic advising profession ready for the fourth industrial revolution? If you don't know what that is, that's AI, artificial intelligence, and how is AI going to change the face of the workforce? And in particular, I'm interested in how it's going to change the career and the job of academic advising, especially professional advisors. So, as I was thinking about this question, my sort of preliminary thoughts about how my lit review is going to look is it's probably going to be 4 main sections, maybe more, and definitely subsections under this as I dig into the literature. But at least from where I'm starting out from, these are the 4 I think it's going to be. So first, I think I'm going to need to define what I mean by the academic advising profession. And then I'm going to need to talk about, well, what is the fourth industrial revolution? What does that mean? I think I'm going to need to describe what the literature has to say about predictions of how the fourth industrial revolution will impact the workforce in general. And then I want to apply those predictions to the profession of academic advising. So that's kind of like the broad overview of how I think my lit review is going to go. For this class, we have to do a 10 to 15 page lit review. So I thought I would zero in on defining the academic advising profession for this semester. So how am I going to do that? Well, you may or may not know the academic advising profession is fairly new. Academic advising was a faculty function for a very long time. And it's really only in the last few decades where professional academic advisors have existed. So along with that came the NACADA Journal. NACADA is a professional organization for academic advising. And the journal focuses on scholarly discourse about research, theory, and practice of academic advising. So I thought I would start there. And it's a fairly young journal, founded in 1981, and it publishes twice a year in June and December. So from 1981, June 1981 until December 2020, that's 80 issues. So instead of going through NACADA Journal and trying to put in search terms, I just thought it's only 80 issues. I'm just going to look at every single issue and scan through the titles and the abstracts and see what stands out to me and what might be useful. So I did that, and as I did that, I downloaded about 90 articles in 6 broad categories. So as I was going through, I noticed there were a few different categories that I thought might be potentially of use and interest. So I tried to sort them into categories as I was going through and downloading them. So what are my categories? The history of academic advising. I found 13 articles there. The profession of academic advising. So this is things like trying to define what is academic advising, and articles about what the profession of academic advising looks like at any given point in time, and predictions about how it might evolve, that sort of thing. Scholarship. So I count anything in this category that is research about academic advising, either about the process or, attitudes of academic advisors or attitudes of students about academic advisors, that kind of stuff. The next big category was technology and the use of technology in the academic advising work. Obviously seems important to my topic. Another category was theory. So this is ideas about what contributes to a theory of academic advising, or academic advising approaches. And then there were some that I couldn't fit it neatly into some of those categories, so that was other. So you might notice that this doesn't quite add up to 90. There's 4 articles that I think could fit in maybe more than one of these, or I'm not sure which one they go in. It might be one or the other. So I'm kind of leaving them out for now until I read them and have a better idea of how to categorize them. So I just gave these articles a skim when I was picking them out. I need to read them in depth. So that's kind of where I landed. So based on that, I thought I would start in the place that seemed A, most logical, and B, had the most articles, and that is articles about the profession of academic advising. What I want to do next is show you the tool I'm using as I read through my articles to build a database and keep track of all the important ideas that I'm discovering through my literature review. So to keep my research for my literature review organized, I'm using a tool called Notion. Notion.so is the website. It's an app. You can use it on a web app. You can download a desktop version. You can also get a mobile version for your phone or tablet. And then they're all linked because it's all saved on the cloud. It's free. There are some paid tiers, but the free one's good enough for me. Check it out. It's pretty cool. One thing it allows you to do, which is really helpful, is build databases, which are then filterable and sortable and all that jazz. So I created a database here. You can see it's called Literature Review, and I've got an empty field open to add to this database. I'm going to show you how I add articles on. So for the title, I just put the title of the article. I'm going to do one called Show Us the Future. Whoops. The challenges facing academic advising. So I've got all these different fields here that I've created, and you can create all kinds of different fields. If you want to add one, you can have all these different types. So you can have a text field, you can have a number, you can have a drop-down menu, you can have a multi-select, a date, a person, files and media. You can upload files. Checkbox, which you can just tick on and off, so that helps you keep track of things. If you want to make like a checklist or something, you can add a URL, an email, a phone number, and then there's some advanced things. You can link databases together and have them do all kinds of crazy stuff. But for now, I'm gonna not add a new thing. I'm just gonna show you what I have. So I have these multi-select categories for sort of the sections that we talked about. I think I will break my literature review down into, and I can always change these later if I need to. But this one's gonna go in advising, and then the subsection is the profession of advising. So for the article field, because the free version of Notion only allows you to keep 5 megabytes of files uploaded, I just keep all my articles on a Google Drive, and then I put a link in my database. So I just click over to my Google Drive, go into the profession folder, find the article in question, right click and say get link. Then I just copy the link back to my database, paste it in, easy as that. Author for this article is Wes Habley. The year is 1986. For the citation, I can grab those from the Nakata Journal website. So this is the article. I just go to Tools, Cite, and I just copy and paste this. I know I might have to clean these up to make sure that they're APA 7, but it'll at least give me something pretty close. So then I have some fields here that are text fields that I can just put some notes in. So for this article, the main idea is sort of predictions about the future of advising. And he's really got three ways he thinks advising might go. So one is it would continue to kind of be a necessity, but not be very highly regarded. A second is that it would be drastically altered or maybe even completely eliminated as a result of competition for campus resources. And a third thing that he says could happen is that it might be recognized as a critical and respected function of the campus enterprise. And then in my notes section, I note that he has he's identified 8 challenges facing advising. So he said, we need to develop a body of research. Whoops. Back here. We need to provide evidence of outcomes other than persistence. He said, pitching to persistence cuts both ways. And if persistence goes up, that's great for advising. But if we have problems with persistence, that's bad for advising. And so maybe we shouldn't just put all our eggs in one basket. He also wants to arouse campus decision makers to action and make advising programs important. He talked about defending the value of advising during a period of decline and retractment. So notice this is back from 1986, but we're about to hit, if we're not already hitting, that same sort of period again, just demographically. So he said, elevating the status of faculty, of advising by faculty. And then he makes some claims there that I actually kind of made some notes of like, okay, I got to pay attention. Did this play out the way that he predicted? Because again, this is from 1986. He talked about the appropriate use of technology, and he talked a lot in that section about the difference between using technology for efficient advising versus using technology for effective advising. I think that idea might come into some importance with my dissertation topic as well. He talked about advancing advising as a profession, and he talks about 5 criteria for something to be considered a profession. I'm not sure where he got those from. I didn't see a citation about that. So that's another just note for me of something to look into and something that might influence my own research. So, and then establishing advising as a career. Basically, he's saying you need a career ladder. You can't just be an entry-level advisor and have nowhere to advance to. So if we want this to really be considered a profession, there needs to be a career ladder and a place to advance to. So those are kind of my notes on that article. Then there's criticism. So this is a place for me to write any kind of critique of what I think there, or if I am reading somewhere else and someone else mentions this article and critiques it, I can put them there. I'm going to leave that blank for now, but you get the idea. So, so now I can kind of just close out of here. Or you can open this as a page. You can be on a page, or I can go back to my lit review and you see it's on here. So, and just so you can see, like, this is filterable. I can filter like by author or by year if I wanted to, that kind of thing. I could filter as this grows, and I have different sections. I could filter by section, so I could make it so that I'm only looking at a given section. So that I think this is going to be really helpful for me as I go to write my dissertation. So I'm trying to start out with good practices now of keeping a good system to keep myself organized. I thought it might help you all, so I thought I would share it. So I think that's going to wrap up my vlog. I hope you have found this interesting and helpful. Hopefully you picked up something of some ideas, or at least it helped you to consider sort of the whys and wherefores of how you're approaching your literature review. And I'm gonna end it there. Thanks.
This is Dave Donnelly presenting part 2 of Shifting Research Paradigms from Quantity to Quality to Virtual. This presentation is about the movement of quantitative research to qualitative research and how that has extended to performing studies online in virtual spaces. In part 1, we looked at the traditional values that define a piece of research as trustworthy. This has traditionally been things like internal validity, external validity, reliability, and objectivity. And one of the shifting paradigms, especially from quantitative to qualitative research and then virtual research, is moving away from these scientific terms, so defining them as credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability. The first of these shifting paradigms in judging the quality of research is credibility. But what does it mean for a study to be credible? In order for a study to be credible, there should be a clear connection between the data and the findings. The relationship between those findings must be reflective of reality. They must relate to real context, and in as many cases as possible, they must work to avoid bias or at least address those biases as they inform the research. In looking at credibility, one of the questions becomes, how is credibility different from trustworthiness and rigor? Is credibility part of trustworthiness? Are they mutually inclusive, exclusive, or neither? Trustworthiness and rigor are overarching measures, whereas credibility is more specific to data and analysis. In order to establish credibility in a study, there should be member checking, involving participants in the analysis, asking for clarification, discussing things with them, and asking about their feelings are all good ways to check in with them. Peer examination is also a very big part. Discussing the results with impartial and partial parties is valuable in this case, and triangulating your data, i.e. measuring the same thing in multiple ways. These are all great ways to establish credibility. The next shifting paradigm is transferability. But what does it mean for a study to be transferable? In order for a study to be transferable, the findings must be applicable from one study to another, and the findings should be applicable to other contexts, i.e., they must be transferable. Clearly conveying boundaries is one of the best ways to establish transferability. Being forthcoming about the who and the where of the study, the restrictions and limitations, and discussing these things in length. Being forthcoming about the number of participants, the data collection methods, and the number and duration of data collection sessions, as well as the time period that the study took place in. The next criteria is dependability. Dependability speaks to consistency of methods and measurement, i.e., having instruments of measurement that give a dependable result. It also speaks to providing multiple perspectives and triangulating a result using multiple tools of measurement, and ultimately being transparent about the results and how they were attained. Establishing dependability is all about providing specifics. Rich description, as in the case of qualitative data collection, is a great way to do this. As with the other paradigms, triangulation and peer review are also a great way to establish dependability. And importantly, other researchers must be able to replicate your study given the instructions that you provide. Confirmability is the final of the 4 new paradigms, but what does it mean for a study to be confirmable? In order for a study to be confirmable, the researcher's disposition should be revealed. The researcher should be completely forthcoming about their biases, their perceptions, and their ideas as they enter into and participate in the study. This is researcher reflexivity. The researcher must also be able to justify their methodological choices. Again, they must state their biases, they must engage in full disclosure, and they must provide all relevant context in their discussion. As discussed, disclosing predispositions is one of the best ways to establish confirmability. Asking questions such as, what beliefs underpin the study? In what ways was the study subjective? Why were certain types of data collected and others not collected? Were there any constraints to the study? And what biases came into play? This has been a presentation on the 4 new paradigms of data collection, moving from quantitative to qualitative to virtual. Thank you.
Hello, this is Doug Bowie, and this is my Research Roundtable segment on the literature review process. And I'll start out by giving a little overview of the literature review process, how to create one, that kind of stuff. Not a ton of time on that. And then I'll talk a little about some of the things and the struggles that I went through that were really necessary when I did my literature review. So literature review should generally be a narrative of scholarly resources related to the given research questions. So things that are really relevant to the context and meaning behind your research questions. So if we're studying, dogs at kennels and their relationship with their owners, then we should have scholarly work that deals with kennels and dogs and owners and their relationships and that kind of thing. Oftentimes it should begin with a very broad coverage and work its way to a narrow focus. And the literature should begin to support those ideas about why the research that is being written about later in the piece of work is relevant. So what does it mean? Why would I want that? And it should lead the reader along to a why of, oh, this is important, and literature review is going to fill in the understanding of the why of what we're doing. So it should identify relevant theories, methods, and gaps in the research, and that's, a kind of a standard answer for a literature review. But by examining those earlier limits, we can begin to point our ways toward new areas of inquiry. And again, our lit review should bring that into sharp focus, that gap is there, and that, this piece of research is going to fill that need. And by analyzing and synthesizing and evaluating the current state, we'll be able to see those gaps. And again, that tends to lead the reader toward that idea. As I did my own literature review, several things became really clear that was not normally clear in the usual discussion of a lit review. I had to have research questions that are quite broad. They cover a number of disciplines outside of education, inside education, and it constitutes a really, really broad starting point. And so I had a lot of sources that I had to dig through and come up with that. And in some cases, there was very little literature that was being done. I was beholden to go back to the primary source of material and read it and summarize it and move on. And there had been very little actual academic work being done, although there had been a variety of other non-academic work done that I reviewed and worked with. It got to be challenging. The broadness of the starting point of the lit review was daunting. And in many ways, I felt that there were a number of subtopics involved that when I took and looked at just the subtopic as it related to my research questions and the broader lit review, felt a little lost. It felt a little disseparated from where I'd begun. And occasionally I had to really focus on what's the primary goal. And in fact, I wrote it down as a single very long sentence of what I was doing. And it combined, like I have 3 research questions, and it combined all 3 research questions into one very long sentence. And when I struggled with some of these separate subtopics, I would go read that sentence of what I was doing and say, does this subpiece fit into that larger sentence? And if I could say yes, then it was a valuable subpiece to have. And if I said no, then I cut it or minimized it or just, extracted out of it the piece I needed and moved on. And that could be a little daunting to try to go through all of this material and do that kind of stuff. And as we, as I worked my way through that, I had to reach this concept of recursive relevance. As I worked my way through more and more and more of the smaller subtopics, I eventually had to look at them and say, is this relevant to what I'm doing? And if it was relevant, then, we read a couple more papers and put in the pieces I need. And if it wasn't, then I cut it. And sometimes judging what's relevant and what's not as a new researcher, I really struggled with. Oftentimes I would have this web of sources that I'd found through, the library or Google Scholar or a number of other, credible places to look for resources. And one resource would lead me to 3 more that had great ideas and wonderful stuff. And I would begin to compile what I wanted, and I'd run down a rabbit hole and come back and say, well, gosh, that really is relevant. I need to put that in, and what do I take out? And at the end, I eventually said, I'm going to err on the side of more in the lit search rather than less, because I can always carve it off. I've got a little background as a woodworker, and one of the redounding themes there is, I can always cut it off, but I can't glue it back on. So, your barber has the same sort of theory. And in this case, I used that same philosophy. I would rather have 20 pages and cut and edit down to 15 that my advisor wants or my faculty member wants or whatever, rather than look at 5 pages and think, well, that's really great and it needs to be more. So I'd rather boil it down and reduce it than have to not have enough. And as a new researcher, I'm reliant on faculty and advisors and committees to tell me that's too much. You've got too much stuff. It's too separate. This really isn't that relevant. Okay, I can cut it. I can minimize it. I can rewrite it. I'd rather be rewriting and editing than trying to decide what else can I put in here. Well, that's kind of my overview of literature review issues. Appreciate your time and attention. Thank you. Research Roundtable would like to thank you for your time listening to episode 3. We hope you've enjoyed it.